It was a damp morning in early November, and a heavy fog blanketed the streets of London, curling around gas lamps like pale fingers. At 221B Baker Street, Sherlock Holmes sat with his violin resting idle upon his knee. The melody he had been toying with, a haunting minor key, faded into silence as a knock echoed through the room. Mrs. Hudson ushered in a figure cloaked in gray, her face half-veiled by a delicate lace. Holmes stood immediately. "Lady Arabella Wentworth," he said before she introduced herself. "Daughter of Lord Charles Wentworth, Chief Science Advisor to the Crown. Your perfume is blended with oil from the Royal Society's greenhouses, and your left glove bears soot, likely from Whitehall's Western labs." Lady Arabella's eyes widened. "You are even sharper than they claim, Mr. Holmes." She seated herself. "My father is missing. 3 nights ago, he was working late in his laboratory beneath Whitehall. The next morning, the room was locked from the inside, and he had vanished." Holmes and Watson arrived that evening at Whitehall's underground laboratory, accessible only via a guarded lift. The lab was filled with advanced instruments, telescopic lenses, electrical coils, even experimental X-ray tubes. No sign of struggle, no broken glass, yet no trace of Lord Wentworth. Holmes studied the walls carefully. "Watson, see here, a thin line of black powder in the floor's seam. And look, these gears beneath the telescope housing are scorched." He found a burned scrap of paper near a furnace. On it, barely visible, were 3 cryptic words: Etherum, Menace, Apertum. "Latin," Holmes muttered. "The ether hand opens." Watson frowned. "A code or a name?" "A ritual," Holmes whispered. "Something esoteric." Holmes summoned an old acquaintance, a man whose name once evoked whispers in both academic halls and secretive societies: Professor Devlin Cray. Cray was a mechanical occultist, a rare fusion of rational engineer and arcane philosopher. Years ago, he and Holmes had stood on opposing sides of an investigation that delved into forbidden sciences and eerie contraptions. Though once adversaries, the passage of time and mutual respect for intellect had turned Cray into something of a reluctant ally, a former enemy, now a valuable informant in matters that strayed too far from the ordinary. Cray arrived at the laboratory under the cover of darkness, dressed in a long coat lined with hidden compartments and copper tools. His eyes, sharp and haunted, scanned the remnants of Wentworth's work with both fascination and dread. Holmes offered no greeting, only a gesture toward the shattered machinery and scattered blueprints. Cray knelt beside the strange mechanisms, running his fingers gently along the etched brass and cracked glass lenses. After several minutes of silence, he rose and turned to Holmes and Watson, his voice low and laced with apprehension. "These devices," he said, "are not merely scientific instruments. They are convergences of science and ritual, machinery designed to disrupt the veil between dimensions. This is not about energy or optics. It is about access, about creating a bridge, a gateway, if you will, between our world and another, a world of shifting shadows and volatile matter." Holmes arched an eyebrow, but refrained from voicing the skepticism that flickered behind his eyes. He had seen too much in his years to dismiss the notion entirely. He simply nodded and reached for the weathered journal that had belonged to Dr. Wentworth. Together, they pored over the late scientist's notes, pages of mathematical formulae, tangled with astrological charts, ritualistic diagrams inked in red, and poetic warnings scrawled in margins. Then they saw them, a sequence of dates, each one corresponding precisely with recorded anomalies in the night sky: meteor showers, planetary alignments, and unexplained auroras. Watson, flipping forward through the final entries, felt a chill settle into his bones. "The next date is tomorrow night." Cray looked up sharply. "During the lunar eclipse." Holmes's gaze lingered on a diagram, an overhead sketch of the Earth, Moon, and Sun, with curious annotations spiraling outward like an invocation. He spoke quietly, almost to himself. "If the final alignment completes the circuit, then the gate will open," Cray finished, his voice solemn. A heavy silence followed, broken only by the ticking of a nearby clock. Outside, the wind stirred with unnatural force, whispering through the window panes, as if something was already stirring, watching, waiting. Holmes, Watson, and Lady Arabella set out towards the Royal Greenwich Observatory, that silent landmark which has long stood tall, watching the paths of the stars and preserving the secrets of time. The sky above them churned with clouds, as the moon's disk began to vanish behind the earth's shadow, announcing the approach of the awaited eclipse. In this place, where science and fate intertwined, they were on the verge of unveiling a more terrifying secret. The map they had obtained from Lord Wentworth's diaries led them to a stone staircase behind one of the main dome walls. There, deep underground, they found a metal door stamped with Pythagorean symbols and stellar arches that did not belong to this era. "This is not just a gate," Arabella murmured, her hand on the pulse beginning to race at her wrist, "but a deliberately forgotten seal." Holmes unlocked the strange lock with a key described in ancient texts as the key of response, a small device the size of a needle, yet made of rare alloys that reflected light in a peculiar way. When the door opened, a vast, dimly lit chamber revealed itself, emitting a pulsating light like a slowly beating mechanical heart. In the center stood a marvelous, complex machine, copper wheels spinning without touching anything, gears driven by electric sparks resembling lightning, and a large mirror on the wall that reflected nothing but absolute darkness. Beside it, a massive glass coffin pulsed as if it were a living being, emitting electric murmurs and faint vibrations that seemed to whisper incomprehensible secrets. The three stood in awe. "What on earth is this?" Watson murmured, raising his lantern for a better view, while his voice's echoes were swallowed inside the chamber. Before Holmes could respond, sudden sharp whistles sounded, followed by the mechanical opening of the coffin. It began to tremble and slowly split open amid sparks. From it emerged a man covered in layers of dust, sweat, and light. Lord Wentworth, whom everyone had thought dead or vanished into another dimension. He staggered, nearly collapsing into Arabella's arms, his eyes lost and confused, as if he had just awakened from a dream that lasted eons. "They used me as a key. They needed a human mind to balance the energies. The machine responds, it speaks, it listens," he said hoarsely, each word escaping as if it were poison from his chest. Before he could elaborate, the ground beneath them shook. The light in the mirror began to ripple, transforming into a silver vortex of dust and fire. In a fleeting moment, from it emerged a humanoid entity, but without clear features. Its body formed from constantly changing, luminous particles, and its eyes glowed with unbearable light. "It's him," Holmes whispered, his voice carrying a fear Watson had never heard before. "The true Whitehall Phantom, not a ghost, but an echo between dimensions, a being not born in our world, but a reflection of what must not be seen." Arabella raised a small weapon, but the entity appeared intangible, more like a walking idea than a physical being. Watson stepped back, saying, "Are we in a nightmare?" Holmes, his eyes fixed on the shimmering figure, murmured, "No, Watson. We are in a reality beyond human understanding. And this machine, this night, was the key." Holmes devised a plan, reverse the mirror's field polarity, and collapse the gateway. But it required precise coordination and Wentworth's codes. As the moon passed through full eclipse, Holmes and Watson struggled to hold the system together, while Arabella read her father's encrypted equations. Lightning struck. The phantom howled, caught between dimensions. Holmes flipped the final switch, and with a brilliant flash, the gateway imploded. Silence returned. The figure was gone. The mirrors cracked. The room smelled of ozone and ash. Back at Baker Street, Holmes stood by the fire. Science should never stray so far into the abyss that reason can no longer anchor it, he said softly. Watson asked, "Do you believe it was truly from another world?" Holmes lit his pipe. What I believe, Watson, is that the mind, like the universe, is capable of infinite wonder, and some doors should remain closed. Outside, London breathed quietly beneath the stars, but deep below Whitehall, one mirror remained whole and it shimmered faintly in the dark.